May the Lord God preserve thy soul in this life as well as in the future age, Sister Alexandra. I am in exile since the year 1886 from the Doukhobors community of Transcaucasia. I implore thee, sister, in Christ the Lord, Alexandra, pray thy husband Nicholas to spare the Doukhobors in the Caucasus from persecution. It is to thee that I address myself, because I think thy heart is more turned should learn the use of the gun, in order to know well how to kill. The Christians do not agree to this. They are put into prisons, beaten, and starved. The sisters and mothers are coarsely defiled as women, very often with railing exclamations, "Where is your God? Why does he not help you?" Our God is in heaven and on earth and fulfills all his will. The most convenient manner of dealing with us would be to establish us in one place where we might live and labor in peace. All state obligations in the form of taxes we would pay, only we cannot be soldiers. If the government were to find it impossible to consent to this, then let it give us the right of immigration into one of the foreign countries. From the fullness of my soul, I pray the Lord for the welfare of thy family. The servant of Christ, Peter, living in exile in the government of Tobolsk.
What is God? God is a Holy Spirit, a holy place unto himself. His soul is an immortal entity, neither born nor created, but self-existent and eternal, arrayed, as with a vesture, with the light of his everlasting immortality. Herewith we give obeisance to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. His dominion is over all in heaven and on earth, over all the seas and the deepest abyss. His abode is the soul of man, which is manifested through the powers of our conscious awareness, our reason, and our will. In the Holy Trinity, there are three essential aspects: God the Father, conscious awareness; God the Son, reason; God the Spirit, willpower. But all have one and the same soul, three powers of the soul, but one all-pervading, ever-present God force.
I think Doukhobors are somewhat very unique in this respect. They do not generally have people come out and explain and basics of our religion and so on so forth. They always felt that the psalms, which were composing their the book of life, as I would say it, where it was passed down orally and you expressed through the psalms and hymns, which the young generation coming up were supposed to do, supposedly were able to get their knowledge from them as to what the Doukhobor culture, what the Doukhobor beliefs in teachings of Jesus and belief in God was expressed through these psalms and the hymns. So that is why, more than anything else, they emphasized strongly in their gatherings is to the singing.
Doukhobor movement, particularly right from its origin, tried to put more rational thought into Christianity rather than mystical thought.
Jesus was resurrected spiritually and righteous people. It's as simple as that. Basically, we don't believe that he got up on the third day and went up into heaven. There is no hell and there is no heaven. It's all within you. It is just a myth.
The word Doukhobor comes from the Russian word spirit wrestlers, Doukhobors. It was given to the Doukhobors accidentally by Archbishop Ambrosius of Ekaterinoslav in the southern part of Russia in 1785. This archbishop used the word to designate a group of protesters against the orthodoxy of the day and against the czar of the day, because the church and state were close together. But the Doukhobors picked it up as a positive word and said, look, we don't wrestle against the spirit of Christ, we wrestle with it. And so it stuck.
Some of the peasants couldn't really afford to be proper Christians then, and it really forced them to start thinking, could this be so? Christ being a simple, humble person, and this was the original breakaway, that a person could really be a true servant of God without having to have an intermediary.
Kerry Kalmakova was the leader of the Doukhobors, who was respected by most Doukhobors right to the present day. She left no psalms, no writing, except an inscription carved at the entrance of the cave, where she and Peter V. Verigan, her successor, often sat and talked. This was in the village of Orlovka in the Bogdanovka rayon of Transcaucasia. Peter V. Verigan, the so-called the first, was given the name Gospodny, which means the lordly. To the Doukhobors, I would say this was a transgression of early equalitarian principles, but it happened amongst the community Doukhobors, but not amongst the independents.
While the leader himself, Peter Verigan, the lordly, the elder, did not demand of the people obeisance to himself. The people only gave obeisance to him because it went along with their conscientious guidance of what he stood for. And their feeling was that he stood on the side of what Jesus Christ himself had taught.
All of my children are pacifists, and I'm grateful for that. I think basically if the Doukhobors, the generation that are here now and the generations to come, if we could salvage that angle of the Doukhobors to a point, I'm sure it would be a justification of all the tortures and the persecutions our forefathers have gone through.
Well, the Doukhobors, as one of the social movements of the 17 and 1800s, were very much against militarism. They were against the state church. They were against militarism on the basis that each person has the Spirit of God in him or her, and therefore to kill the other person is to kill the Spirit of God or the Spirit of Christ or love. They equated all these things, love, Christ, beauty as one. And therefore it was a natural outcome for them to eventually build up to a protest. This was the first public demonstration of 7,500 or so, 7,000 Doukhobors who participated in 3 different areas of Transcaucasia in the burning of arms. Now, it was suggested that Peter V. Verigan, who was in exile, that he suggested that this burning of arms take place. He did, but also the leaders, various other leaders within the local Doukhobors accepted this and planned for this big day on June 28th, 29th of 1895. So they brought their guns, their swords, and so on secretly in the evening in these 3 districts, 3 scattered districts of Transcaucasia, and together with wood, kerosene, they lit it at midnight.
I'm Fedosa Lukanova Verigan, born in Russia. I was 8 years old when the arms burning began. I remember this, and the government began imprisoning them. My father also happened to be in this group.
Early Essex, July 10th, 1898. Dear Maver, you know the sad story of the Doukhobors in Caucasia. Now the Russian government drives them out of the country. Would the Canadian government accept some 12,000 of these men like Mennonites? Yours affectionately, Prince Peter
I have just had
Kropotkin.
a letter from Mr. Vladimir Cherko enclosing a number of papers regarding the Doukhobors. 1. Are the people fairly good farmers? 2. If among other aids the government were lending them or giving them seed, would they be likely to use them to their advantage? 3. Are the people addicted to any of the outbursts of religious ecstasy resulting in sexual or other excesses that are alleged of the Scotia and Klebti, for example?
To sexual excesses, but they are living the most chaste and family life. 4. They would adapt themselves to any climate. 5. They would send their children to the common school if the children would not be obliged to receive religious teaching. With kind regards, yours faithfully, Count Leo Tolstoy.
The group that was persecuted the most was anxious to get out. And because they had, the sponsors, Tolstoyans and Quakers, had some funds, some limited funds, there was land available in Cyprus as a temporary measure. So they only stayed there several months. In the meantime, negotiations went along with Maver and Clifford Sifton, Ministry of Interior, and also with the advice of Peter Kropotkin, the anarchist from Europe.
2 Doukhobors delegates, Yvonne and McCortoff, are expected to leave Liverpool for Quebec next Thursday, accompanied by Aylmer Maude.
There are 3 points of utmost importance. 1, no obligation of military service. 2, independence in their inner organization. 3, land in a block. They cannot live in isolated farms. Can you obtain that from the
Privy
Canadian
Council,
government?
Canada. Approved by His Excellency on December 6, 1898. The minister, considering that the Doukhobors would appear to be a most desirable class of settlers to locate upon the vacant Dominion land in Manitoba and the Northwest Territories, is of opinion that it is expedient to give them the fullest assurance of absolute immunity from military service in the event of their settlement.
Dear
in
Mr.
this
Smart,
country.
their idea that they might as well be frozen to death in Canada as flogged by the Cossacks is natural enough, but no one would venture to induce the government to receive a greater number of them than can be reasonably well sheltered and fed during the winter. I am yours truly, James Maver.
There is no reason whatever that I can see why these people should not be equal to, if not superior to, any of the foreign colonies in our country. I am very pleased with those who have come out and feel pleased at their ultimate success in their new home. With kindest regards, yours very truly, James A. Smart, Deputy Minister.
I was 10 years old. We came on the second ship, then came beyond Winnipeg. There was a building there where all people stopped. There we finished the winter. And then we crossed to Yorkton in the spring. On the way, everyone agreed who would live together in the villages. We moved there. The forest was not far away. We had obtained tents in Yorkton. We made tents and spent the summer.
We settled in riverbank dugout in village of Uspenia, which was cave dug out by elderly. About 200 Doukhobors were there, living in cave for a year.
We'll start from the south, Petrovka, and then Terpenia, then Uspenia, then would be Slavenka, and then would be Spasolka. But this way on the west side of Blaine Lake, there was Herlovka, and then there was Troitska and Poziraevka, just east of town. The village was situated on a kind of a high rise and a valley on each side. The village ran north and south, and there was kind of a low spot to the west and to the east, and that's where the gardens were, because the low spot always grew a good garden.
This is a photo of a group of women plowing land. This was taken in Saskatchewan in 1900s, and I believe they done it in 1901 in some villages. In the early years, the men went out working outside, so you had just the women in the villages, and instead of using the shawls, they sometimes would hitch themselves to a plow, about 16 or 20 women, and pull this plow and plow a plot of ground around the village to plant the gardens. You know, it was a matter of survival, you know.
Well, according to my grandfather, some of the old fellows got together and they punched out this rock in a circular way, and they pulled out the center, carved it with old crude tools, and they had a mill that used to run with oxen and pull. Sometimes the women would pull it themselves even, and they grist it and sweep it off. That's what he was telling me. The stone is still there and is a nice landmark. The first mill north of North Saskatchewan. It was a grister, Petrovka village, about a mile up from the bridge.
When all of us Doukhobors had immigrated to Canada, Peter Hospodny was not with us. We lived for 4 years without Hospodny. He arrived in the evening. Our people at Adrodnia greeted him with singing. The winter was very cold. The singing ended, and Hospodny began greeting the brothers and sisters. He said, "Slava Господу, God has taken care of us all, and we are reunited. It seems there has been a separate house built for me, and I invite you to come to my house tomorrow. There we can meet." He wanted now to visit all of the villages. He had telegraphed before that he did not want the people to meet him at Atrodnia. When he arrived, he would go and visit them all at the villages. He approached a group of sisters with whom was Anastasia, who had just arrived from the farm. He said, "Who are you?" to Anastasia, and she replied, "I am Anastasia Holobova." Hospodny said, "Fine." He knew the family well. Then he said, "I'm taking singers with me. Would you not like to go with us?" She said, "I would like to go if you will take me." Thus they took her along with the singers. They toured all the villages. Now here at this house of Hospodny's, they needed a family. So when he arrives, it is warm for people coming to see him. A cook is needed. My mother was a widow. They invited her. So we moved there to Hospodny's house. We lived there. And then Peter Hospodny, having toured all the villages, he found there were many shortages. No livestock, nothing with which to work the land in order to sow grain, so there would be bread. They obtained several tractors. How would I call them? Those that use fire. Tractors, and among the villages they began to plow the land. They also obtained horse and oxen to plow the land. They plowed a lot of land. They moved forward rapidly.
The Doukhobors migrated to Canada on the basis that they would be allowed exemption from military service, 2, that there would be land available for them to farm, and 3, that they could practice their beliefs, within the general context of things.
Yorkton, May 12, 1900. But we cannot think a marriage union becomes lawful because it is written in the police book, and for that will be paid $2. We think that such a written and pay lowers the marriage union and does away with its lawfulness. But a true lawful marriage union we call such when that union arises and continues freely and only through pure feelings of united love between the man and the woman. We recognize also that the law of God is the law of liberty, and that an open sin is easier than a secret one. And if there arises in the marriage union feelings not of pure love, then that union from the beginning is not lawful, a sin of adultery. For that reason, of the 2 evils, one is best, that they do away with their unlawful marriage union and be separate, and in this will their divorce be lawful. There are also such rules that each dweller in a house has to make a report to the police of each newborn or dead in his family. We cannot be subjected to this rule, because we can see no necessity of it in the rules of God. It is known to the Heavenly Father outside of the police writing when he sends into the world and when he calls out. Ask the number of newborn or dead in the family. If anyone must know, let them ask. But we will not inform anyone ourselves.
Protection against outsiders, that you should make individual entry for the land, and at the expiration of 3 years, you can do what you like with the same, conveying it to any persons as trustees of the villages or the Doukhobor community. And I have decided that those who will take their homesteads and accept the land free from the government may live together in 1 or more villages, and instead of being compelled to cultivate each quarter section held by each Doukhobor, that the land around the village itself may be cultivated, and the work which otherwise would be required for each individual homestead can be done all together around the village. Assuring you of my continued respect for the Doukhobors, I am your obedient servant, Clifford Sifton, Minister of the Interior.
Frank Oliver, when he became Minister of the Interior in 1905, he was a man that was hostile to all Slavs, and he reversed the Sifton policy. He says, today it's different. Everyone has to obey with the letter of the law. That is, each adult over 18 will get 160 acres if they work the land themselves, also if they take the oath of allegiance. Now, this was something new. And the Doukhobors would not take the oath of allegiance in Tsarist Russia because they felt everyone was equal, and taking the oath they felt would bind them to militarism.
What's the difference between one king and the other? I like to know what's the difference. One may have a gray beard and another may have a brown beard, but basically they're all the same.
So there was pressure, definitely. The ranchers, for example, were incensed right off the beginning, but also there was a group from the United States that came up to test this, and they would squat on Doukhobor land and say, look, you do something about these people. They're foreigners. They're initiating a foreign type of concept in society, communalism. In 1906, McDougall, Reverend John McDougall, was appointed to investigate the Doukhobor land, and he recommended that individual ownership be the order of the day.
The only Doukhobor entries that are properly held are those held by the men who live on their land or in a village within 3 miles of it, and who cultivate their land for their own use and have either already become or intend to become Canadian citizens or British subjects. All other entries in the names of the community Doukhobors will be cancelled.
So on June 1st, 1907, notices had been out by this, and the land was open for public sale. And 75% of the land, that's 258,000 acres or so, reverted to the Crown. This is valued by some groups at around $13 million, and it was sold for public auction. It was the biggest land rush for a decade.
Ferrygan, Saskatchewan, February 16, 1912. To the Honorable Robert Rogers, Minister of the Interior, Dear Sir, our people desire to receive, if they leave for British Columbia, $4 per acre, or if you would kindly allow, they would consider it worth $5 per acre as remuneration
While
for
the
the
department has no
cultivation and
objection to your
improvement
people
of this
leaving
land.
your present reserves and moving to British Columbia, regret no assistance can be given by way of compensation for lands abandoned. W. W. Corey.
James Maver, one of those that helped the Doukhobors to migrate to Canada, called this a breach of faith, and he felt this would linger on for many decades, and it did.
By this time, there had been a large amount of work put into development of the land, with the building of brick factories, sawmills, and many other enterprises. About 15 acres per working man was left around each village, but since this was not enough to support the life of the people, it was necessary to purchase land elsewhere.
And Hospodny began conferring with them. They kept deliberating for 5 days. Whatever you wish, I advise you, so you don't feel angry with me. Those who wish to accept allegiance and take the land, do so. Those that don't want to, we shall resettle.
Soon, the land was found and purchased outright in province of British Columbia, and a new life was started up there.
Land was bought beginning in 1908. Settlements soon began after, and by 1913, most of the people from Saskatchewan had moved there. There were some communal land left in Saskatchewan, and a few independents.
He said, we have purchased an area. There were enormous trees. Several people couldn't reach around them. That's how big they were. I want people from each village to go immediately. Summer is beginning. It was very difficult. They had a shortage of money to do things. And then they established a sawmill. The trees were large for lumber. And then they began building homes, large ones, for several families. They didn't have the resources for individual homes. There were many orchards. They even loaded boxcars and sold fruit. Also for the factory, there was very much given. You've heard what sort of factory it was, and the kind of jam that was made there. Everyone praised it. A lot was even shipped to England. This I remember being told by Huspodny.
Most of the grain for the flour and horses for the sawmills were shipped from, we'll say, Berrigan, Saskatchewan. That is a distance of over 1,000 miles. This area was a little too great for the people, and was decided to establish a daughter colony nearby. Peter Berrigan instructed my grandfather, Simeon Ivanovich Berihim, and told him to go and pick the men that is necessary to establish a colony. So the first colony was established north of Lundbeck, approximately 9 miles north of Lundbeck. In 1916, additional land was bought around Cowley. And by 1917, the movement from British Columbia ceased. So approximately in 3 years, there was 300 people, a little over 300 people settled in this area. There were approximately 12,000 acres here that the Doukhobors owned. This was the communal enterprise, and it was a branch of the Christian community of Universal Brotherhood, and the head office was at Brilliant. We had our own manager here in Alberta, in Cowley.
Here at the settlement known as Utashenya, there was 24 villages, and then you had 8 villages at Brilliant and 2 villages at the plateau on the mountain there. And then at Pass Creek, there was 6 villages and 4 villages at Blueberry Creek here, and later on, 2 villages built at Raspberry. That was just this Castlegar district, but then, of course, further up the river, you had the Glade settlement of 11 villages, and then you had about 3 villages not built like this at Shore Acres. I believe there was 4 villages at Crescent Valley, 4 if not more.
This room was known as Hastine, or in English, a sitting room, you know. And on the table, they usually had bread, salt, and water, which really mean that those are the basic elements of life. It served the purpose of gathering of this part of the villages to discuss their problems. Also, it served the purpose of prayer meetings. And if a wedding or a funeral happened, it would be held in this room.
The symbol of equal and trustworthy humanity, bread, salt, and water, stand on the table in front of them, separating the men and the women.
And the prayer meeting would begin by reciting a psalm. They would then begin singing a psalm, or rather chanting. One could maybe even compare with the Hindu chants.
The head person says a prayer, followed by more prayers recited by 2 men and 3 women. Singing in Russian begins of 3 psalms and 3 hymns, and then the Lord's Prayer is recited and sung. Speeches, announcements, and more singing begins. And at the conclusion, all stand up and sing, "We've concluded our assembly."
As you might know, in the Russian church, they have icons or images of saints, you know. So they said, here's the commandment, why we should bow to a wooden thing, and so on, when it says not to do it. And so they said we would rather bow to another person, because he is the highest creation of God, and it's through him that God reveals himself in the world, you know.
This oven is quite large and could take 12 loaves of bread. They would weigh about 3.5 pounds. The oven stayed warm for a long time. It kept the heat there. Especially in winter, they would fire the oven every day, and it would keep the house warm upstairs. There was a small stove in the sitting room, and there was another stove upstairs, but it was the oven, really, that kept the house warm.
Here you see a row of cabins set up in a U shape. There's 12 of them. The 8 cabins served as pantries, and the 10 cabins served as sleeping quarters. As I mentioned before, you had a family with a small child or a grandmother and a grandfather staying in one of the cabins.
Most of the villages had running water. They had a wooden pipe factory, so they put in an irrigation system.
They had a shoemaking shop almost in every settlement and made their own shoes, you know.
We didn't have to buy nothing, you know. We've been get by about 3-4 different families live, 35, 40 people in one house. Well, we raise our all vegetables, fruit, everything. And if you got garden like strawberry or gooseberry or blackcurrant, raspberry, you sell to the factory and you get money for it. Then they buy mozzarella, butter, sugar. That's it. But if you, they must allow you $100 a year for the family, for your clothes and keep your family going. It's very economical, you know.
People often say, well, this is a simplistic attitude, and, you know, one person might be willing to say, well, I reject all forms of violence, and there'll come along a more violent person and do him in as a result. Well, the Doukhobors were willing to take this risk, and they said, well, we've burned our guns, and we're not going to participate in this type of thing anymore. It doesn't matter what happens, you know, because our conscience doesn't allow us to do it.
Just put yourself in the place of a returned soldier. He's fought in the war, he comes back, he sees certain people living there, didn't go to war, they're prosperous, they're exempt from military service. How does he react? He feels these citizens aren't pulling their weight. They didn't really see that they also contributed indirectly, I suppose, to the war effort by helping the economy as such. So the politicians in turn barred Doukhobors and other war objectors from coming into the country. This was 1919. Also at this time, the Doukhobors were denied the vote in British Columbia. It was only in 1957 that this law was reinstated and Doukhobors in BC received the vote.
29th of April, 1919. Just recently, the Grand Forks delegates of the Reconstruction Board detained me at Grand Forks and forcibly compelled me to sign document giving my consent to sell the Doukhobor land. P. Varigan.
What about attempts to actually take land away from the existing community-held land?
There was attempts, and Peter V. Varigan said, go ahead, take this. We will be wards of the country. And it stopped there. Played the bluff on him.
It was true that the Doukhobors did keep to their own ways and presented a picture of being quite happy keeping to themselves, which raised the scorn of the outside people who did not understand these ways and in many ways considered them inferior. There was also the economic aspects. The CCUB always kept to a practice of buying wholesale directly from suppliers, even distributing everything itself, thus completely bypassing local merchants. Therefore, local business interests create strong political pressure against the CCUB.
The Grand Forks people began watching Haspodny. It did not suit them, the success of the Doukhobors. The officials became very obstructive. Now there was Ivalenka. He even came to BC. Haspodny took him all over. He said, Varigan, they have you under surveillance. They want to eliminate you. Haspodny said, well, what can I do? Then they began writing letters.
I wrote to Varigan last spring. It was a brotherly love letter. I dreamed that harm would come to Peter. I wrote him of the dream I had. My dream was that I had left California and had gone to Saskatchewan. In Saskatchewan, my dream showed all were brothers and took wheat and put it in stooks. People were working in the fields. They suddenly heard a great noise. Mr. Varigan came, and in my dream, he was working some distance away from the others. He was stooping down, working. I saw Peter Varigan behind me. Peter called me. I stood before him. I looked at him and saw all his face was all mud. His cheeks were muddy. I said, Who hit you like that? After that, Peter Verrigan cried. He said, a strange country did that to me.
He called to Anastasia. Mabel, come over here. She said, I won't let you go anywhere. You stay home. He said, no. The devils have been watching me for a long time. Even if I'm here, they put a bomb under the corner and kill me. He went to Saskatchewan and organized things there for everybody. He returned and said, Mabel, I've met and parted with everyone. He began calling together the chosen ones and explaining how to do everything. So he stayed about a week. He left and they killed him.
There were investigations, a number of investigations by the RCMP, but nothing conclusive to this date. There were much speculations. Some stated there was a watchmaker from Europe that came down to kill him. Others said it was people within the movement that tried to kill him for one grievance or another. These are pure speculations, and until they're proven otherwise, there's not much value in talking about them.
Have you made any attempts to get information from the RCMP?
Yes, I have, and they have always written back stating the case is still open. You can't see the documents.
After the death of Peter Lordley Verrigan, the people were in a state of mourning, and they felt that they should keep their children out of school, kind of, as part of that mourning for a while. And in response to that, the authorities charged them fines for keeping the children out of school. Mm-hmm. That's what you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. And they actually came and confiscated some property to take those fines.
First they come to the warehouse up there in the town.
They came, a lot of them, just for fun, half of them drunk, and start to take out stuff,
They break lock, take the crowbar, and clean up everything.
Well, they thought they had rice. Sheriff was with them,
They take all flour and wheat they had here in a special bin, extra wheat. They sold an auction sale.
After the death of Peter Lordley Verrigan, a close woman companion of the leader believed that she should inherit the leadership and carry on the teachings of Peter Lordley. There were a few followers that followed her. Anastasia Holubov, or Anastasia Lords, as she was known. In 1926, they decided to move to Alberta and to form a new colony, independent of the Christian community of the Universal Brotherhood. They rented land near Shoal-Dice. 26 families came and settled there. Gradually, by the early 1940s, the village had disbanded. By 1942, it was not a communal village anymore.
Well, Peter P. Verrigan was the son of Peter V. Verrigan, and when Peter V. Verrigan died in the train explosion of 1924, 6 weeks after, there was a big gathering, or sabrania, and the Orthodox or community Doukhobors proclaimed his successor as the new leader, namely Peter P. Verrigan.
This is the area known as Sion. There's a lot of orchards here. You can see the remnants of them still. And the whole district here in Grand Forks was called Fructoia, or the place of fruit.
When John Verrigan came from Russia in 1927, they put trees all the roads in our property, 10 feet apart, different varieties, close to maybe 8 miles altogether. And we built this road. It takes time and take money to buy dynamite and blasted that rock, Government never built road at that time in our land. Everybody uses this road, but Doukhobors have to build and pay from his own pocket, by his own hand. Same bridge, been built a bridge at Berlin.
In 1910, I think it was established first. It was a huge project here. This is a boiler. It was operated by steam. The place was enclosed in the mill. And this is only a fraction part of it. I think maybe 1/4 of the mill now, what it was originally. The flour was made by huge stones. It's stone ground.
Peter P. Verrigan was given the endearing title of Chistikol, the cleanser. He was to cleanse the wrong in the community. He was a perplexing man, almost schizophrenic. One group of followers would praise him to the sky as the god. On the other hand, another group of opponents would say he's the devil. And in some ways, he reacted likewise. He did have some accomplishments. He initiated the youth groups. These have continued to the present day, singing, Russian language courses, libraries. For example, there's a library in Blaine Lake, Saskatchewan. He was responsible for having it built through community funds, of course. He promoted many things, and yet under his leadership, the membership dwindled from quite a few thousand to less than a couple of thousand. But there's also, you must take into consideration, this was during the period of the Depression.
All this flat and all this side hill, there was orchard. And we had taken house downtown, West Grand Fork, where our warehouse up there. But small place. That was 1922 or 23, just before old Berrigan got killed. And 1934, young leader, he rebuilt this for jam factory. And manager told me, he says, don't make number 2. This year we're gonna show what we are. And we give number 1 everything. But one night, they gone in a flame, midnight. That was Saturday. We just finished jam. We're beginning to start tomatoes, canned tomatoes. But gone. 68,000 first quality jam. And we lost all, but we pay all growers. That's the story about jam factory. I was chairman when we built that irrigation. I was in charge of this place. One well down there, 200 for irrigation. There's in this house 2 wells. Before 1928, there was school up there, what they call Carson Corner School. Well, people live over there. It's too far for kids winter time to work there. That time was no school buses. When Verrigan came, he looked at this matter and he built this house up there, this school up there. Well, that's right in the center. And some people from government and from university, they decided to be better if they're going to mix up all the children together. And they closed this school. Well, that's easiest way to make assimilated, our children.
There was always this kind of disagreement between the authorities and the Doukhobor community about the matter of education, and there was generally quite a bit of resistance on the part of the community. When the second Peter came, he initiated a policy where the children would attend schools. He said, we will get whatever we can of usefulness from the formal education that's offered by the Canadian system. He says, we'll try to keep our own traditions and our own ideology and combine the two.
Well, he tried to unite all the Doukhobors under the named Doukhobors of Canada, but not too many independent Doukhobors joined because they were suspicious of his leadership.
In 1937, the foreclosures began. In 1938, the land was not ours anymore.
See, in the Depression time, when Peter II Verrigan came from Russia, we had debts for near $1,300,000. He came 1927. And up to 1938, when foreclosure make it, he paid more than $1 million debts. in depression time, and everybody been working.
The collapse was not only due to the passing of Peter Verrigan. It was pressure from without and within, I would say, while the government had recognized the fight of the farmers and had helped them, the ones that lived individually. They did not consider the CCUB as a collective group of farmers, or as such. They classed it as a corporation and did not give it any aid. And as a result, they had to borrow money, which they were not able to pay back, although they did pay back a substantial amount of it.
See, Bennett, Wade Bennett, not this Bennett in BC, he can rule the country. He had depression, people looking for job. But Reagan don't ask for job, and don't put his hand for welfare, for relief. No, sir. We've been clear land, we've been build school, we've been build factory.
19,000 acres, about $6 million worth of property. This included the property in Alberta. And the debt was only about $300,000.
For a researcher today, if it doesn't, it ought to seem absurd and say that there is something wrong. Now, possibly Chistyakov just wanted this very thing to happen, to show that that's what happened and the injustice of the monetary system as it was at that time.
The receiver was the boss of the whole CCUB. He assured us that he would soon resolve the debt of the CCUB and that we would then be able to carry on as before. After nice-sounding promises such as these, we were soon to see what actually would happen.
The flour mill in Lunenburg was burned in 1936. The large elevator in Cowley, National Trust Company took it away, and it was sold and was dismantled. The same for the prayer home that stood here. It went for sale for $200. Peter Verrigan's residence next door, beautiful home, went for $300.
At that time, I was, as director, put in charge of the community sawmill in Grand Forks. I received an order for 5 carloads of spruce tongue and groove. The receiver, Mr. Balmer, a veteran of the First World War, sold this stock at giveaway prices. It had been sold for $12 per 1,000 feet. The logs alone had cost us $15 per 1,000. I was shocked and told them that this was nothing but robbery and a deliberate destruction of the community business. He told me he was only concerned about the liquidation of assets necessary to cover the outstanding debts.
Well, the governments, whether the federal or provincial, I don't think were anxious to see the Doukhobor community survive, because it was communal structure and therefore interpreted by the North American ethic as foreign to the profiteering value of society.
Then, one day, word come around. The sawmill was burning. The police were there and were questioning the watchman, Vanya Danshin, about the fire. Danshin said that he had been there all day, but that Balmer had come at noon and advised him to go have a rest.
You know, when we was in charge about all our property, land and what's on the land, building, brickyard, factory, everything, sawmills. But when receiver taken in hand, I understand, then he responsible, he in charge. He take all responsibility himself. Well, if this sawmill burn and about 500,000 good stuff lumber burn down, why this everything drop on our shoulder?
I hope you can show me as angry as possible, because that is how I feel at the moment. My experiences while the CCUB was in receivership have left me disillusioned.
All this is destroyed. Neither an elevator or anything is there left. Even Haspodny's plan, there is nothing of it. Not even one dome. No, Fruitvale, there are 2 domes standing, as Haspodny had built them. Otherwise, nowhere. They've burnt them all. They destroyed all Haspodny's plan. Well, you see, they've destroyed themselves.
No.
Well, what else? A prayer, may God bless. Let's go to Sionskaya mountain, all brothers and sisters with me. We see the beauty of our Father, how marvelous He created our people, how the sun shines in the sky, and the stars give before Him. Let us bend our knees before God, and praise to God we will give. God gives us life, and happiness He requires of us from the heart. Our soul He made higher and greater by giving us a mind. Peace be to God.
Most, that is 95% of the Doukhobors in World War II stayed at home, paid to the Red Cross. Some went to jail, very small number. Some enlisted in the war and were in the war, some were killed. In Saskatchewan, there was an attempt by the military people to get everyone involved, either to go to war or to pay to the Red Cross or to work in the railroad, or not the railroad, but the road construction up north. And so those that got conscription call-ups were chosen to go to work or go to military service.
So these camps were compulsory?
Yes. There were others in there too. There were some Mennonites too.
The promise wasn't kept. We left on June 28, 1941, and we arrived to Prince Albert, and there we were picked up on a truck, on a big 2-ton truck, and we sat in the back just like, well, in the back, and we arrived at the camp just about midnight. But the days were long. I think that were the longest part of the day, and it was just getting dark, and the camp was all set up. They showed us where to go and all that, and we took up our residence, and next morning we had breakfast, and from then on each one was asked what he'd like to do. I wanted to work in the blacksmith. We weren't given the top jobs. We were the ones that are manual labor helping. I think it was just alternatives. Service, either jail or go to the work camps. They had it for 4 months, but we didn't stay that full because we didn't have to pay $15 a month to the Red Cross. We did our 4 months and we were through.
The other boys who just elected to go to jail, how long were they sentenced for?
They were sentenced to 4 months too, but they didn't serve their 4 months. They had off for good behavior. I think they had about 10 days off or something like that.
When the Doukhobors first came, they started to prosper by their very hard work. And then a group of people, they liked education, they lacked good spiritual guidance, but they had a feeling within them that something is happening that's wrong. And they burnt the first binder, I believe, in Saskatchewan, that's trying to denounce materialism.
There's no set beliefs. They were commonly known at the beginning of the century as sons of freedom, in a sense that they were individuals seeking to be free, in a sense of pure anarchists. And there were various phases of the movement. I like to call them as zealots. 1916, there was a famous Doukhobor community building burnt by a group of 6, and they stayed at the scene for their punishment. They argued that the reason they burnt this community home was that it gained the connotation of kind of a palace. Therefore, they protested to the Doukhobors themselves, their brethren, saying, "You're going against your principles." After this, there were hundreds of burnings of schools and so on, public buildings, post offices and so on, bombings, but most cases, very few people were caught and convicted. There were some of those that burnt their own homes, and usually the homes weren't that good. They were in Christova, Gilpin, Shoreacres. Some say it was against the protest for the Third World War. or the Second World War, whatever period it was. Others were grievances within the community itself. There was also a big parade of people in 1932, which resulted in the arrest of 600 of the group and 365 children. They were sent to Piers Island, adults and the children to various homes.
In my opinion, there is no reason whatsoever. And whatever they have done, we didn't retaliate, we didn't do anything to them. We just want to live peacefully in our own way, how we are living, and let them live and leave us alone.
Peter II, before his death, he laid framework for the union of spiritual communities of Christ. The USCC did not really start right after his passing. It took several years for it to get functioning proper. And actually, structure of USCC was done by John Varigan more than anybody else, because he had lived as secretary with his grandfather.
Declaration of the Doukhobors, the Union of Spiritual Communities of Christ. Long before the Socialist Revolution, the world is experiencing. Our forefathers professed an end to imperialism, advocating a communal way of life on the basis of from each according to his means, to each according to his needs. Our forefathers have left us their legacy of toil and peaceful life. They counseled us to keep away from the cities, the chaotic congestion and pollution, the human rat race featuring capitalistic exploitation, speculation, and personal gain at the expense of others.
In the USCC, there's no such thing as owning of any arms. Sooner or later, you'll have to draw the line someplace. You know, you might say, well, drinking, smoking, that's also not Doukhobors. But there's a big difference between drinking and smoking and registering your gun and saying you're a Doukhobor. It just don't add up.
We feel that singing is a way of expressing our feelings and our thoughts. And I'm sure that if you heard any of our singing or our songs, you will know that what we sing comes from the heart.
The Doukhobors had as a standby in their philosophy for centuries the general idea embodied in the phrase that the Spirit giveth and the letter taketh away. They passed down their ideas through the psalms and various liturgy by word of mouth, by rote, you know. Strictly it was an oral culture for centuries.
There are choirs here that are celebrating 25, 30 years anniversaries. The choirs have been sent throughout the whole width of the country, in Canada and the United States, with the message of peace and friendship and brotherhood.
By definition, a social movement is the collection of people aimed at trying to right things towards some goal or to bring about a better state of affairs. And the Doukhobors and other spiritual Christians were of this type of background.
Of having reached a higher state of spiritual evolution than many other people. I'm talking about the Doukhobor philosophy now, not the individual person within it. Have we in our hearts ever thought that through the power of prayer, especially a mass of prayer, what kind of power we might let loose into the universe that may sway the hearts of people to promote peace and abolish murder? We must take the lead.
The movement as a religious group, as a sect, well, maybe it wouldn't be much left. The Doukhobors came with 7,500 in 1899, and their maximum was around 20-some thousand at one time, and the last census shows them at just over 9,000 people. At my estimate, there's at least 30,000. But it's a matter of definition. What is a
Ideas
Doukhobor?
have been preserved over the centuries of Doukhobor existence through the complex interaction of culture and language and religion. And possibly if you weaken any one of these factors to the point where the community would no longer have sufficient cohesiveness to function as a unit, you might begin to lose touch with ideology.
So as long as the conditions of war and inequality exist, Doukhobors as a social movement will exist.
The word mir is a transliteration of the Russian word mir, which has actually a triple meaning, and it happens to be the Russian word for peace, also the Russian word for world, and a rather more archaic meaning is that of a communal village organization. The concept gradually developed that we should establish a youth-oriented English language publication serving the interests primarily of the Doukhobor community, but also in an effort to establish contacts with the English-speaking non-Doukhobor public. And that's how the magazine Mir was established, and also branched off into some related activities, such as the bookshop.
When the communal way of life ended, I was only 7 or 8 years old, so I remember very, very little of it. I do remember as a child there was a lot of friends, and there was free time on Saturdays, whether it was spring or summer or fall. All the men would quit working on a Saturday at noon to bathe in the steam houses. And Sunday was a day of rest, a day of worship. And it did not matter if you went visiting or not, but you put on your best clothes and you either expected to go visiting or expected visitors, or I knew that it was a Sunday. Today, it is hard to tell one day from the next.
The trend among the younger generation in particular is that the ideology is the most important part, in particular because similar ideologies springing up in the contemporary period. The whole idea of pacifism and nonviolence, simple way of life, vegetarianism.
No one can say that the Doukhobors have risen and retaliated to whoever has done them harm. From the time they have burned their arms to this day, they have not retaliated in force.
Be devout. Trust in God. Love Him with all your heart. Be fervent to His holy church. Honor and keep faithfully His commandments. Follow the virtuous. Avoid vice. Be reasonable. Look to the consequence. Then consider your means. Do not bypass the opportunity for doing good deeds. Do not undertake anything without deliberating, and do not hurry your deliberation. Do not be too hesitant, only if the occasion demands. What you do not know, do not affirm or deny. Inquire into the matter, and you will be wise. Be moderate. Avoid drunkenness as you would hell. From intemperance is born sickness, from sickness, death. That which you need, acquire through labor. In poverty, ask for help. Accept it if it is given, and be grateful. If you wish to undertake something, first assess your abilities, then proceed without hesitation. In misfortune, do not lose courage, and in time of good fortune, do not be arrogant. Respect poverty. Be cautious in different situations. Sorrow is frequent. It is commendable not to hold a grudge. Forgive the sinner. Yield to the pleading. Respect the elders. Be sociable to your equal. Courteous to the poor. Greet those whom you meet. Return the greeting to those who greet you. All this observe, and you shall be fortunate. Glory to our God.
И не вернешь назад, для чего без него цветы стану я рвать.